Let me die with the Philistines.
Kill the prisoner! Kill him! Kill him!
So we've been talking about about Samson and the Samson syndrome. And so, if you remember last week, we were talking about how disobedience can actually get us into a lot of issues and a lot of problems. When Samson was born, he was set apart as a Nazirite. And so he was given strict instructions from his mom, his dad, that you were not supposed to marry outside of your group or an unbeliever. And Samson fell in love with Delilah. She was an unbeliever. And it caused a lot of issues and a lot of problems with Samson and his family. And so, one of the things that we're going to talk about today is untangling the strands of bitterness. Because maybe you've experienced this and maybe you haven't. But when you've been betrayed, it hurts. But when you've been betrayed by someone that you trust, it hurts worse. If it's just someone that you just randomly met or whatever and they betrayed you, that's one thing. But when someone that you trust very much betrays you, there begins to fill up this thing of bitterness and going against them. Max Lucado had a sermon that he entitled, "When the World Turns Against You." And here's what he said in this sermon. He said, it's more than rejection when the world turns against you. He says rejection opens up a wound. Betrayal pours salt into that wound. It's more than loneliness, because loneliness leaves you in the cold. Betrayal closes the door. He says it's more than mockery, because mockery plunges the knife. Betrayal twists. It's more than an insult. An insult attacks your pride. Betrayal breaks your heart. And when you begin to unfold this about Samson, you're going to understand where we're coming from today in talking about betrayal and bitterness. You see, because Samson, God had given him strength. And the unfortunate part about it is that that strength went to Samson's head. And all of a sudden, this strength, as we were talking about last week, I believe it was, is how your strengths can become your weaknesses. And this was Samson's. His strength became his weakness, because all of a sudden, this strength that Samson had to be able to do great things that God had allowed him to do, he began to get so prideful. Wow, look at how many boards I can break. Look at how many chariots and horses that I can hold back. There isn't anything stronger than me, Samson. I'm the strongest man in the world, and nothing could defeat me. Nothing can overpower me. Nothing can defeat the strength of Samson. And what ended up happening was this pride that Samson had ended up going from pride, leading him into betrayal. Because what you see is all of a sudden Samson now sets out on a path for vengeance. All of these things that these people are doing to me and saying about me, I'm going to get even with them. Because I'm Samson. I'm stronger. I'm better than they are. And what Samson did was he said, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to marry this Philistine. And what Samson ended up doing was he plunged into this downward spiral of bitterness and anger and rage. How many of you all put up Christmas lights, and when you take them down, they look like this? Right? And so next year, you're sitting there and you're trying your best to untangle this mess. And so many times it's like a frustration, and you give it up, right? And you just say, let's go to the store and get some more. That's the way it is with bitterness. Because what ends up happening is bitterness begins to entangle itself. And you're sitting there and you're trying to find just like the end of it. And you're trying to say, well, where does it start? Where's the end of it? And you keep finding and looking, and maybe, just maybe, you might come and find out that, wow, I found the end of it. I know. It's all one strand. I'm smart. I'm not putting 3 strands together. You don't think I'm crazy. But it doesn't work that way. Because what ends up happening is, as you keep trying to untangle this mess, you get angry, and angrier, and angrier. And so what ends up happening is, you come to the point where you're trying to untangle the strands of bitterness, and the anger is building up and building up and building up, to where you come to a point where you find out you can't untangle it, and then the next thing you know, you go into a fit of rage. The anger has gotten there. This, ladies and gentlemen, is what happened to Samson. Samson became so bitter and so angry that then he goes into this point of rage. You see, it's easy when someone breaks your heart till it goes to breaking your soul. It's easy when we allow unresolved anger to basically start up the fire of vengeance. It's like a gasoline you're going to pour onto this thing. And it begins to build and to build and to build more another. So what ends up happening is that we think the revenge equates to an explosion of anger and rage. You ever watch somebody who's consumed with bitterness and been around them and tried to talk to them? For instance, you had someone that you loved, and they died. And all of a sudden you got bitter against God. For instance, maybe they developed cancer. They were going along in their life, and their life was going well, and everything was fine. Then all of a sudden they go to the doctor. The doctor says, I'm sorry, but you have cancer, and you've only got 2 weeks to live. And then all of a sudden, you begin to get angry with God and bitter towards God. Well, God, why did you let this happen? God, why did you take my loved one? Why did you do this? And then the next thing you know, you begin to get angry with God. Your bitterness begins to fold into anger. How many people have you run into when you want to talk to them about God, and the first thing they will say to you is, Where was your God when my loved one died? Where was God when he took my child? Where was God? They've gone from this bitterness to anger to now rage. Their whole life is consumed with wanting to get even with God. I'm going to show him for taking my child. I'm going to show him for taking my loved one. How dare him do that? Because we become bitter. This is Samson. And this is where we're going to find Samson. Because what ended up happening was, this thing was between Samson and his father-in-law. And what ended up happening was, many people began to start dying because of this bitterness between Samson and his father-in-law. What ends up happening is Samson's wife, his father-in-law, they're all dead. Their wheat fields, their vineyards, their orchards are all laid to waste. And in retaliation for all of this, the Philistines, they began to get really angry with the Israelites and saying, it's because of him that we're having to go through all of this. And so what ended up happening was 3,000 Israeli or men of Judea took and they went after Samson, and Samson goes and hides in a cave. And so here we come to this in Judges chapter 15 in verse number 11. Then 3,000 men of Judah, they went to the cave at the rock of Etam, and they asked Samson, don't you realize that the Philistines rule over us? What have you done to us? And look at what he said. I have done to them what they did to me, he answered. How many times have we done the same thing? I'm just going to do back to them what they did to me. I'm going to get even. So what ends up happening is whatever they did to us, we're going to do it back. And now the battle begins. We begin to try to outdo them. They do something back to us, we'll do something back to them. Back to us, back to them, back to us, back to them. And never ever reconciling anything. We became to get more bitter and more bitter and more bitter. And what happens is we begin to find ourselves just like Samson in a modern day cave, locked up in there, licking our wounds. Everybody's against you. They've been looking for you. They've been fighting against you. And you've been retaliating against them more and more. And the next thing you know, you're by yourself. And this is where Samson finds himself. He finds himself by himself. Because what ends up happening, ladies and gentlemen, is eventually our anger passes. Have you ever found yourself this way? Somebody made you mad, so you've got to get even with them. You did. And then they got mad, and you got even with them. And now all of a sudden something in your life happens. And you look around, there's nobody there. You're sitting in a spot all by yourself. Nobody to talk to, nobody to listen to you. And now you begin to replay the DVR of your actions. You replay the conversations. You replay the attitudes. You replay the confrontations that you've had with each other, saying, I wish I had said that differently. I wish that I could have taken that back, but I can't. And you're sitting there and you're realizing you're wounded all over. You can look at this wound and you can remember back when you got that scar, right? I've got operations and I look at those scars and I can tell you exactly when I got those. They're constant reminders of those. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's the same way it is with our life. The scars sometimes don't show on the outside because they've healed here, but they haven't healed on the inside. And you're still looking, how, Lord? How can I mend those scars? They betrayed me. And I got even. This is Samson. You see, if you go back and look at the story of Samson, you could have seen all through this story that God had given Samson places to turn around. I was driving to Charlie and Michael's yesterday, and there was 3 little cones there and a sign that said road closed ahead. And I looked at it and I thought, what's this road closed for? There's nothing. I don't see anything. And I know there's only like one driveway, so I'll just drive around it. So I drove around it, and lo and behold, I saw what it was. There was a power line that was down and was laying across the road. And I thought, you know, I think I can drive over it. I've got enough room to get up on the side, and I think I can drive around it. Then I thought, you know, I'm not too sure if that thing is dead. And I'm sure not going to go pick it up to find out. So I'll just go ahead and I'll turn around. The problem was there wasn't any place to turn around. I had to try to drive that car backwards to find a driveway that I had passed in order to get turned around. Well, here's what God had told Samson. He had put those signs in his life. And he told him, Samson, here is a place you need to turn around. Because, Samson, if you go further down this road, you're going to get to a spot that you don't want to be in, Samson. And then once you get past that spot, you're going to go to another spot, and you don't want to be there, Samson. You're going further and further and further into a spot, Samson, where there's not going to be a way to turn around. In our life, ladies and gentlemen, with the bitterness and everything and the rage and the anger that we are building up, God has placed markers in our life and saying, stop. Stop. If you go past this point, you're running into danger. Samson had those points. If you go back and read the rest of the story of Samson, prior to this, you will find that God had given him ample opportunity to turn around, but he didn't turn around. He just kept going and going and going. And what happens is there are some times that we need to understand that God has given us stuff in His Word to help us to learn, to listen. You see, if you go back to Hebrews chapter 12, in verse 1, you need to understand something. Therefore, since we also have such a large cloud of witnesses surrounding us, let us lay aside every weight in the sin that so easily ensnares us and run with endurance the race that lies before us. There are times that what we're doing is we're trying to run this race. How many of you all ever ran track? A few of us? All right. The rest of y'all were cool because you were the spectators that was out there cheering us on. Right? Ain't wrong. Most of you probably never even went to a track meet. You said that is the most boringest thing I've ever seen in my life. When your kids ran track, you prayed that they ran in the first, that their event was within the first 10 minutes. Because track meets generally lasted 2 to 3 hours. And I pitied the parents that had to come and watch their kid do the high jump or do the discus throw or something that was always last. After everybody else had cleared out and gone home, you got these 2 kids out there getting ready to throw the discus and about 4 parents. Now mine was neat because they always ran ours first because we ran the relays, okay? Because they knew that we were fast and we were going to get out of there, okay? Not really. It's just they wanted to clear the track out. And so they just basically set it there. It's really neat because when you're running in a track race or a track meet, those guys that are doing the discus and the hurling of the javelin or whatever else they were doing, and the girls that were going to run and things that were going to happen and the parents that happened to be there, you're running that race and you're just trucking down through there and you're hearing, go! And I'm hearing this, go Charlie, go! Run Forrest, run! You know, that kind of stuff. Y'all saw that movie? Cool, okay. I starred in it. I was the box of chocolate. But this is what Paul is saying. He's saying, listen, don't you understand that you are running a race for God? And while you're running a race, ladies and gentlemen, there are people around you watching you. They're witnessing what you're doing. And the problem is that we get ensnared with so many things. Like, for instance, running a track in a track meet. You always wanted to be the fastest person. Why? Because they gave you a ribbon. You didn't want to come in last place because they didn't give you a ribbon for last place. Not like they do today. Today they give everybody ribbons, right? So it's like, okay, whatever. Kids run and they say, why don't you run faster? Why? I get a ribbon. You know, the other person gets a ribbon. What does it matter? We're all getting ribbons, so it really doesn't matter. But what he's saying is this, that what you need to do is so that when you're running, there are certain things that you need to toss off. For instance, things like somebody's approval. Listen, we're not here to try to win each other's approval. We're here to try to win God's approval. Samson wanted to be liked by everybody, but he didn't turn around. And what ends up happening is sometimes there are things in our past that we carry, things like approval of other people, things like revenge. I can't tell you how many people that I run into today that somebody did something to them 40 years ago and they're waiting to get even with them. And they haven't realized that the person isn't even alive anymore. And you can't get even with them. There's things like revenge, like lust, greed, envy. And what ends up happening is the list goes on, and it's both unique, but it's also common. Our experiences are different, but yet they all end up in the same bucket. You can classify it. And this is what God was trying to tell Samson. Samson, why are you doing this? You see, I've shared this with you, and sometimes I don't think you really realize. Do you know that each and every one of you are uniquely made? None of you are the same. You're totally different. You're uniquely made. But each of you, of us, being uniquely made, are still supposed to fulfill the one purpose that God has for us in this world. I can't fulfill your purpose. You can't fulfill mine. God uniquely made each and every one of you for a certain thing in life that He wants you to do, and nobody else can do it. There's certain people that God's bringing in your life to reach, and He's wanting you to do these things. And may I say something to you all, that from the moment you were born, I put out a post this week, and it just asked the question, do you feel that God, if God had not kept His hand on you every day, that you would probably be dead by now? How many times have you almost been in a wreck that would have killed you? I was talking to someone yesterday, and I was going to Burger King. I'd gone up to visit Diana, and I was going to Burger King, and I'm driving, okay? And anybody been to Burger King over here off of Briel? Okay, so you're coming up Briel, and you know how you got to turn. I don't go up to the light. I turn and I go across, right? Okay, so there's this lady coming across the parking lot, okay? And I'm turning, and she's coming across the parking lot like this, and I'm here. She didn't even notice that I was there. She was so attached to the phone. I get up there, and I get to the drive-through, and I'm getting my food, and here comes a car around the corner going up the driveway to get to the drive-through, and here's this woman. Not one time did she ever look up. She almost got killed twice. Then she goes across the parking lot over by Jack's and the pet store and everything else that's there, and crosses that intersection, and here's a car coming this way, and she's still talking on the stinking phone, and never one time realized that God had kept her from getting killed 3 times. And she probably still doesn't know that God had put His hands on her to keep her from getting killed, because she's so concerned about what's on the phone. And to tell you the truth, I don't think she shut up the whole time. So I don't even realize who was on the other phone, because they probably had laid the phone down like this and went out and did whatever they wanted to, and she's still talking, not even realizing that nobody's listening to her. And we laugh. But that's what we do. There are so many times that God is laying His hands on us and protecting us and keeping us alive. Because why? He uniquely built us to do something, and now He's taking His hands and placing them upon us and continuing to guide us in the things that He wants us to do, in those extraordinary things in His kingdom. So what do we need to do? We need to do 2 things, ladies and gentlemen. We need to separate from the past. You see, in our flesh, we hurt because we've been hurt. We know what the pain's like. And here's what happens. When I had my appendectomy, okay, I was in the 6th grade. And I got out, I had the appendectomy on Thursday, and I got out of the hospital on Saturday. And my younger brother, Chico, when my mom brought me home from the hospital and I got out of the car, he came running to me. Okay? Chico was 7 years younger than me. I was in the 6th grade, so I was 11, maybe 12 at that time, and he was 5. So he comes running to me. What's your typical reflex? Grab him and pick him up, right? That's the worst thing in the world that you can do right after surgery. With stitches. Is to pick that child up. And so I felt this pain, right? And then I also felt some more pain because my mom slapped me. And said, don't you do that, you know? And it's okay, it's cool. But that pain lasted for a little while. I'd only been home maybe about a week. It was a Saturday night. And my mom, or my sister, my older sister, was at our house. And she started going into like a panic attack and losing her breath and everything. And my dad was at church. My mom hadn't let me go to church yet. She kept me out of church. And I thought, wow, that's cool. I can go have surgery and don't have to go to church. That's the only way I got to skip church, okay? And so we couldn't get a hold of my dad. And so I ran. I just had a surgery a week ago. And I ran from my house across the bridge over to the church, which was roughly about a mile or so, in a full sprint, as much as I could. And when I got over there, guess what's hurting? My side is killing me. And I learned those pains and those hurts that were there. I could continue to carry that pain of, every day in my side from that appendectomy. But I've learned to get past that pain. It doesn't hurt me anymore, it's all healed, it's all scars there. But the pain's gone away. And so today, I can't run far, but I can still run. And it doesn't hurt. Because I've learned how to get rid of that and how to get away from those things and the process of healing. And so what I've done is I've separated that from my past. It's something that happened. I could continue to every day bring that operation with me and still let that control my life. But I don't. I've separated myself from that. And let me say this to you. There are times that I've been hurt by people. People that I've trusted, people that I really cared an awful lot about. And I've been hurt by them deeply. But I don't let that run me anymore. I've separated that. And the only way I learned how to do that was through God's strength, not by anything that I've done. Because if it was me, I'd still be hanging on to some of those things instead of releasing them. And what we've got to understand is that what Paul told us is this. He said, "This throw off your old sinful nature, your former way of life, which is corrupted by lust and deception. Instead, let the Spirit renew your thoughts, your attitudes. Put on your new creature, created to be like God, truly righteous and holy." Do you understand? God is every day, ladies and gentlemen, trying to mold you to be righteous and holy. And the only way that he can make us righteous and holy is we've got to start getting rid of some of the old stuff, the old baggage. It's got to go away. And we've got to separate ourselves from the past. There's a lot of things in my life that I've done that I'm not proud of, but I don't let it rule me because that's not me anymore. That's not who I am. That's who I was. And to be able to separate yourself from that, is where God begins to start laying his hands on you to make you righteous and to make you holy. And longing for that time when we can say, when he says to us, all right, now you've done exactly what I've asked you to do. You've done exactly the work that I've asked you to do, and your work is now completed. Come on home. Come on home. And to hear him say, well done, thou good and faithful servant. Come on home. You've run the race. You've finished. You didn't quit. We've got to learn. In separating ourselves from the past, ladies and gentlemen, you've got to learn to stop the slide. Because right now what's happening is your life is continuing to slide down, down, down. I've shared with you many times, we were kids, and honestly, I can tell you that God had his hands on us, because if he didn't, we were dead. I can't swim a lick. And going into a river that has undercurrents, and you know where the undercurrents are at, and you're coming down a hill, a slope of a levee, on a piece of cardboard that has smoothed the grass down, and I mean, by the time you got to the bottom of that thing, you're flying. And if you don't get, you've got a path, honestly, I'm telling you no lie, you've got a path from maybe here to here is the widest path you've got to get off that piece of cardboard before you go flying into that river. And you've got to and everybody's trying to find out who can make it the farthest, the closest, without going into the river. There was a few that didn't make it, they went in. And it was like, you got to get yourself out, because I'm not coming in after you. And so every once in a while, when you're sitting there on that piece of cardboard, and you're holding that piece of cardboard, and you're going down there, and it's accelerating, you're trying your best to stop that slide. Because pretty soon you're going to hit the bottom, and you're flying. And you could jump up and get hurt. And that's the same thing that God's trying to tell us. He's trying to say, listen, you're sliding into this place, and there's times that you got to realize, you got to stop the slide. It's like getting on a toboggan. They got to have brakes on those things, because if they don't, they get going too fast. On a sled, you're hoping that somebody's controlling the brakes. On a bicycle, you're going down a hill, and you're hoping that somebody knows how to operate the brakes and operate the brakes properly, so that you're operating the brakes in the back and not the brakes in the front, where you go tumbling. And sometimes we need to understand, because God said this in Ephesians, he says, and don't sin by letting anger control you. Don't let the sun go down while you're still angry, or anger give a foothold to the devil. Every time you allow anger to start taking a foothold in your life, ladies and gentlemen, you're allowing Satan to take a foothold in your life. Not possess you, but mess with you. And he'll do that with the anger, because he'll keep bringing it back. And so not only do we have to stop the slide, but last but not least, we've got to understand and let God deal with the vengeance. There are times I have to be careful of the illustrations that I use sometimes, because some of you all will know who I'm talking about. But if you do, just keep it to yourself, okay? I was out in Somerville, and I was pastoring a church there. And there were so many people that were tied, some people that were tied to the building, that what ended up happening was that the church had agreed to allow us to buy the house, the church, the old church building that was sitting there, and we had a house that was there, and that was our house. Well, then it flooded. So some people, what they did was they found out, oh, we can get them out of that house. because that building is in a floodplain, and I know that they cannot raise that building to get it out of the floodplain. And besides, you're not allowed to build in a floodplain. So therefore, I couldn't do anything. I couldn't raise the house or do anything. And I shared with you that I got a notice from the county, Preble County, that I basically had 30 days to evacuate the property and find a place to live. This was 2 weeks before school started. We're searching everywhere, we can't find a house. No place at all to live. And finally, we had about 3 days left, and we finally found a house that was just right down the road, and my kids got to go to the school, to a different school, which was great. But can I share something with you? The people that caused that to me lost their house and lost everything. Now, I could have done a lot of things about getting vengeance. No, I just leave it to God, and God deals with it in God's way. Sometimes when we allow vengeance, or we want to take vengeance, you need to understand God knows better about taking vengeance than you do. And there are some times that his vengeance, you look back on it, and do you like what he's doing? No. But that's his, not mine. I know what God needs to do in order to get to the individuals and do these things. And so here's what God says, okay? And today, I have no bitterness against these people. I've been blessed beyond measure. You know, from that point forward, I raised my kids in a great place. They went to a great school. They got some great social skills. I wish they would use them sometimes, but, you know, they don't. But here's what he says. He says, get rid of all bitterness, rage, anger, harsh words, and slander, as well as all types of evil behavior. Here's what he says. Instead, be kind to each other, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, just as God, through Christ, has forgiven you. So what we need to understand is this morning I'm going to finish differently, because instead of playing a clip at the beginning of the sermon, I want to show the clip at the end of the sermon. I want you to watch this with Samson.
Rolla misled me. I believed I could free you, but I was wrong. I will give back every piece of silver for your release.
Show your love for me now. Free Caleb instead of me.
I cannot leave you here.
Free him. And you can have my forgiveness.
I will always love you.
Delilah. You were right, Caleb. We should fight. Gather the men. Prepare to take the city.
But how can I without you?
With the power God has placed within you. He has not abandoned me, Caleb, because I am in these chains. Even inside these walls, I hear his call. And maybe for the first time, I am hearing his desires and not my own.
I love you.
My strength is now your strength. My eyes, yours. You have called me from birth, and now I listen. What would you have me do?
So you realize Samson's eyes are gone. His strength is gone. Delilah, who had betrayed him, has now said, I'm so sorry. If I could just take it back. I'll love you forever, but I can't. And now Samson is at the last of his life. And he's realizing, God, I really messed up. The bitterness and the rage and the anger that I had, Lord, it has driven my life. And look at what it's got me. Chained as a slave and as a prisoner who cannot see, who is weak and cannot do the things that you want me to do. And he says, God, your eyes are my eyes. Your strength is my strength. What would you have me to do? My question to you is this. Are you going to become the eyes, the hands, the feet of Jesus to do what it is that he wants you to do?
Hello, this is Pastor Chuck Cotton from Calvary Baptist Church. First of all, I'd like to say thank you very much for taking the time out to either listen to our sermon or to watch it on video. We are grateful that you've actually taken the time and hope and pray that it has been a blessing to you as it was to us as we delivered it to our congregation. We ask if you have any questions whatsoever that you email us at pastorchuck@calvarybaptistmiddletown.org, or you could come in and give us a phone call, if you would please, at area code 513-423-7251. I'd like to take this opportunity to also invite you to come to our church and visit us, if you would please. We actually have small groups on Sunday morning starting at 9:30, with our morning worship following at 10:45. Prior to our morning small groups, we also provide donuts with coffee, milk, orange juice, a time for fellowship, get to know each other, have a good time before we actually break out into our small groups for Sunday. Our worship services are uplifting, they're fast moving, and everything in our service is just a fast pace. But we do take time every once in a while to slow down as we feel the Holy Spirit moving, and we never want to hinder it in any way. We also have on Sunday evening, during the school year, we have Awana, and Awana starts with a Puggles, actually from age 2 all the way up through high school. And during that period of time, we also have a worship service. Both of these start at 6 o'clock and end at 7:30. Our Wednesday night, we have a Bible study, which starts at 7. We generally finish about 8:15. We would love for you to come and visit with us. Don't have to dress up. Just come as you are, because to us, it doesn't matter. You're a child of God, a creation of His, and so to us, you're important to everything that we do. Our motto here is building the kingdom one life at a time, and we hope that we have a chance to visit with you, get to know you as you get to know us. So thank you, and may God bless you.